Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 108.
This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 108 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/108. Today's sponsor is ScotShot, scotshot.com. Whether you are taking a class as a complete beginner or an experienced, highly competent shooter seeking an NRA instructor certification, ScotShot classes are comfortable, friendly, and taught with a high instructor-to-student ratio. So head over to scotshot.com and check them out. Today's show is also sponsored by Gift for Gun Nuts, giftforgunnuts.com, where you get great hunting and shooting ideas for the hunting and shooter on your holiday shopping list. You still have a few more days to head over to giftforgunnuts.com and enter for a chance to win a Henry rifle. They have daily updates, and you can get chances to win daily. So head over to giftforgunnuts.com, check them out. Today's guest is Riley T Bowman from concealedcarry.com, and now here's Riley. Riley Bowman, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Riley, you're on the executive team of concealedcarry.com. Would you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, my official title is I'm the director of training at concealedcarry.com. I oversee our training curriculum, our instructors, certified instructors, and I also oversee our media production as well. So a lot of the video content that our team produces, and then a big piece of that is the podcast that we do. Actually, I have two podcasts now that are under our umbrella, and so that's kind of what I do. I do a lot of podcasting, and then I'm constantly working on training and curriculum development and all that stuff.
Oh, excellent. And what kind of things can people find on concealedcarry.com?
Concealedcarry.com is and I would say this is an evolution still in process, that, we want to be the first place that people think of to stop, for concealed carry related information, products and gear and training. And that basically describes our company. We're a threefold company in that the first thing people are probably going to notice and be familiar with is our content. Whether that be written editorial, which every day we're publishing new articles, whether it's gear reviews or, topical articles about, tactics or response or whatever it may be, shooting tips, or our podcasts. We've got the Concealed Carry podcast, which publishes twice a week. We cover, in one episode, we cover news events and stories, legislative updates, and we always feature what we call justified saves stories, which are basically DGU stories, right? Where the criteria for that is it's got to be civilian or citizen, it's got to be a civilian use of deadly force. And so not law enforcement or military or anything like that. And, and then it's got to be lawful, at least as far as we can tell. So we comb the web for news stories every week, and there's never a shortage of them. And we feature 3 or 4 of them each week on the podcast. And then the other episode we do in the Concealed Carry podcast each week is more topical based, breaking down, shooting tips, tricks, tactics, et cetera, and or interviewing other guests that we bring on. Other content, we're constantly producing video content, whether it's for our YouTube channel or we have a members-only area for special, members-only content. And so we've got training videos and things like that for members. We put some things out there for the general public. And so that's the content side. So that's the one piece of our business is editorial and content creation. Then we have the training division, which is really where the business got started about a decade ago. And I've only been involved for about 7 years now, but we started putting together this network of instructors, and it started very small, but now we have 60 plus instructors across the nation. They all work independently, but we're kind of in a transition mode where we're starting to bring a little bit more unity to our instructor network, and that's through releasing some now what we are considering our concealedcarry.com kind of curriculum, and certifying instructors to teach that curriculum. So but every weekend, and quite often actually throughout the week too, just about every day or every weekend, we have classes going on somewhere across the country. And so you can see training courses and stuff on our site there, concealedcarry.com, and sign up for something that's nearby you. We're very concealed carry focused, and that's the nature, obviously, of being concealedcarry.com. And that's where we started, was really, trying to make sure we were doing a good job, a good quality job with teaching students about concealed carry. So we, every weekend, and like I said, and frequently throughout the week, we've got concealed carry classes going on all over the place. But we're trying to bring more advanced, shooting live fire courses and stuff out to market as well. So that's an ongoing process. But yeah, and then the third piece is product sales. So on our site, folks can buy training gear, holsters, and one thing that we sell a lot of is like cert pistols and stuff. We sell a ton of that stuff. We have a product that our company owns. We actually have the distribution rights for North America. It's called the Glock E-Trainer. It's a dry fire training aid. So we have a lot of things kind of like that, like little things, training aids, stuff for practice, holsters, et cetera, et cetera. So basically broken down into content, training, and then gear. And that's what we're passionate about, is trying to give folks the information, the training, and then the gear that they might need to, get out there and carry concealed and be responsible, law-abiding, awesome CCW carrying people. So there you go. That's the best way I can break it down. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I was reading that you guys are in 26 states. How do you find instructors and qualify instructors, and and I imagine at some point you want to get to all 50 states. So how are you guys working on that?
Yeah. So, initially we kind of looked at different markets and things and kind of identified, hey, this would be a good market to get into. I mean, for instance, one of our busier markets, besides, our company's based here in Colorado in the Denver area. And this is where we have the most courses and things going on, and probably the most concentration of instructors as well. Utah would be another big one, but kind of a surprising one that came along several years ago is Louisville, Kentucky. And we have an instructor out there. I don't remember how we found him. I don't remember if we found him or he found us, but he stays very busy out there teaching classes in Louisville. So, some of it is us kind of identifying markets and reaching out and, kind of either by word of mouth or just even doing searches sometimes, like, hey, who are some instructors in this area? And kind of vetting them, looking at them, their bios, their backgrounds, make sure they're good people, and like what's important to us more than necessarily like a perfect pedigree as far as, well, they were special forces or special ops, or they were in military or law enforcement for 35 years. More than that, although that is obviously something that's taken into consideration, but we're not just looking for people that have the knowledge and the background and or the experience, but we also want to know that we have good teachers, because I think everyone's probably been in those classes where the instructor definitely knows his stuff, but is not always the greatest teacher and the most effective at communicating what they know to a student in a way that's meaningful and that's impactful, that student's able to take that away with them and do something productive with it. So that's some of the things that we look for. So a lot of times now, I would say more and more we add instructors to our network because they find us and they hear about us and they want to be a part of it. We do the best we can to market classes for them. And of course, the other big thing is trying to build the brand so that, once again, this is the first place for people to think about to come to get things like that, including training. And so, the hope is there, and it works very well in some markets. And in other markets, we're still kind of developing and trying to build that brand better and stronger. But, the hope is that instructors join our network, and our job is to put butts in seats for them to teach. So most instructors will continue to kind of operate somewhat independently. They're still free to market and sell seats in their classes themselves, but we try to be that supporting arm to augment that, to facilitate that, and also if they choose, we want to also take a lot of the management side of things on. So we have a dedicated customer service team, folks answering phones for prospective students or past students, anyone, or customers, whoever has a need or questions can call our dedicated customer service team, get good help that way. We can take payment through our site, obviously, for signups on classes. We put together rosters for the instructors. So some instructors love to have us just do everything for them, and others, want to have a little bit more control over some of those things. So that's that's just how we roll. And if anyone listening wants to be a part of things here and a part of a really exciting, growing national brand and team, well, they're welcome to reach out to me.
Excellent. And going back to the content side of the site, you guys recently published a study about the effectiveness of armed civilians in stopping active shooters. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, this was something that we spent months working on. The brainchild behind this effort was the president of our company, Jacob Paulson, and but it was a joint effort amongst a number of our team members. We have content writers, we have some guys that have somewhat of experience in research and things like that. So a collective effort to go through what essentially was 3 different FBI reports. And so the FBI back in, I think it was 2014, they released their first report, which covered the years of 2000 up through 2013. And so it was a study on active shooter events. And the FBI, just listed what the different events were, kind of what happened in those different events. And there were some basic statistics along with that. Then again, in 2016, they released a report for 2014 and 2015. And then earlier this year, they released another report, so a third report for 2016 and 2017. And so essentially we have 3 reports covering 18 whole years. And you'll note that this started 2000 when they just started putting together these reports. So they actually leave out things like Columbine, for instance. That was in 1999, and a number of events that happened before that. So this just started since 2000, and for 18 years, the FBI has been tracking these active shooter events. Now, the FBI's definition of active shooter events is somewhat broad, but the way it's written is these types of events have to, they can't be a domestic violence type situation. Okay, that's one thing that disqualifies it from being an active shooter event. A firearm has to be involved, and that makes sense by definition, active shooter, so hence firearms got to be involved. And typically it's going to be in a kind of public area of some sort, whether that's a business, or it could be out, just out in the open space, on the street, whatever. It could be a church, a school, a movie theater, whatever, right? And so we looked at the FBI data, and then folks will probably be familiar with John Lott over at the Crime Prevention Research Center. And he responded to these FBI reports and said, hey, FBI, you know what? You guys actually missed some really important active shooter events, or ASEs. And so John Lott wrote a couple different articles highlighting what those missed events were, and contacted the FBI and said, hey, you guys missed this stuff. This should have been in your report. And in some cases, the FBI said, well, we ruled this one out because of XYZ reason. But there were a number of concessions that the FBI gave that, hey, actually, you're right. We did miss that in our reporting. Now, keep in mind that in the current statistic gathering that the FBI does, well, things might be changing now. I don't know that for a fact, but for years and years and years and years, yes, the FBI tracks all these different crime statistics, but they never separated out from that and identified, from all the other statistics. They never really called out separately active shooter events. It's just not something that they really tracked officially. And so when the FBI started putting together these reports, they were just literally they were just digging through things and trying to find these different events as best they could. And so there were some that were missed. So we took a lot of the information from John Lott and the Crime Prevention Research Center. We took the FBI reports, and then we also, I believe, I don't remember for sure, but Jacob would know for a fact, but I think we may have even added one or two more other different events that we felt like were also missed and, as far as we could tell, meet the FBI definition. So if they meet the definition, well, we're going to include that data. So what we were left with was 283 active shooter events in that 18-year period. One of the big takeaways that we were interested in as concealed carriers, and this is our business, is we wanted to know how much of an impact did concealed carriers have in some of these events. Now, the FBI tells you in their data that, hey, only 8% of the time does an armed citizen have some sort of positive effect on these active shooter events. And so you go, okay, 8% of the time. Well, okay, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. A lot of these events do happen in places where people, don't normally carry or are prohibited from carrying, such as gun-free zones, school zones, and so forth. But the data on that one's actually really interesting too. You'd be surprised that a lot of these active shooter events, not as many of them happen in gun-free zones as what people probably think. So there were a lot of interesting things that came out of this, but what it came down to is out of 283 events, there are 33 of them where armed citizens were present that we know of. Okay, so that's like, I think that worked out to be like 18% or something of the total events we had armed citizens present. And actually, I think it was a little bit less. It was 14 or 15%. Anyway, I should have this in front of me, but I'm just shooting from the hip here. So
Sure. Yeah.
So what we were really interested in is, okay, that's fine that 8% of the time armed citizens had some sort of positive effect on these events, but like that's not fair to only say, well, it only happens 8% of the time. Well, that's true, but there's such a huge sample of the data that where there isn't even an opportunity for an armed citizen to be there to affect. So the question was, how effective, if an armed citizen is present at an active shooter event, at an ASE, how effective are they? Now, what we found was really surprising. In fact, I could not have called this myself. What we found is that looking at those 33 events, there were 2 of them where the armed citizen just flat out failed. Okay, and one of those was the CC's Pizza Walmart shooting in Las Vegas a few years ago. Active shooters went into the Walmart. After they killed some cops in the CC's Pizza, a Good Samaritan, concealed carrier in the Walmart saw the shooters come in. Well, he saw one shooter come in, and the second shooter came in a little bit after. And so he started following the one shooter. And he drew his gun out and was getting ready to, deal with this dude. But the man's wife was also an active shooter. She was participating with him, and she followed him into the store and ended up behind the civilian, unbeknownst to the civilian. And so she shoots him and kills him before he could take out her husband. So that was one of the failed events. And there was another one that was kind of a strange one out of, I think, Wisconsin. I think it was Wisconsin. And it was actually a couple of hunters and some other dude, just started shooting them and killed them all. And they were armed, but it seemed that they weren't able to fight back effectively. So there was 2 events out of the 33 where the concealed carrier or the armed citizen failed to do anything productive. 6 of the events, the armed citizen had some sort of positive effect, and that's the kind of the phrase I use, meaning that they somehow slowed down or distracted the shooter. To where, and the way we know that this may have been the case is that it was statements from law enforcement officers where they said, hey, thank goodness for this armed citizen who lessened the damage. They saved lives by engaging the shooter and slowing him down. And then the remaining 25 events were situations where the armed citizen actually stopped the shooter. They shot the shooter, stopped him, or they engaged him, and that caused that shooter to, commit suicide or something along those lines, right? So what we get when we break this all down is that 75.8% of the events where we have armed citizens present at these ASCs, 75.8% of the time, armed citizens stop the active shooter. 18.2% of the time, they save lives by slowing him down or creating a distraction. And 6.1% of the time, the two events, they failed to not do anything helpful at all. So looking at it, our approach was, hey, if they stopped or slowed down the shooter and saved lives at all, that's a success. That's, that has to be called a success. The fact that lives are saved because of an armed citizen getting involved. So the 18.2 and the 75.8, that gives us 94%. And that's why we had the title of this article as being armed citizens are successful 94% of the time at active shooter events. So kind of a big deal. And it's not something that you see highlighted in mainstream media at all.
Right. Yeah. It's very silent. I think that a big part of the anti-gun community really believes that, that there would be this, crossfire where, innocent people would be dropping dead left and right as the two guys with guns tried to kill each other. But I think,
or you have two good guys that get involved, and they, you're exactly right. They start engaging, each other or shooting innocent people, and that part of the study also was really interesting. I don't know if you want to hear about that, but the fact is,
I was just going to ask. I didn't think you would. I was going to guess that it never happened, but it sounds like So, yeah.
Out of these 33 events, 0 times did an armed citizen injure or kill an innocent person. 0. So 0% of the time did it turn into the wild, wild west because we allowed law-abiding armed citizens to carry a gun into a public place. Now, it doesn't mean that couldn't happen, right? Like I will hate the day that something, because it's definitely possible, right? Somebody makes a mistake. That'll be a sad day if somebody breaks this trend. But I think it's really positive news that it doesn't turn into the wild, wild west like many people would have us believe. And also as a sober reminder that, hey, you know what? This doesn't mean that we have an automatic, that we're automatically going to win and come out of the situation, successful. We need to also be training and taking our training seriously and making sure our skills are sharp and our mindset is where it needs to be. And that if we, for some reason, happen to be in an event like this, that we get the job done and we do so effectively and we don't put anybody else at risk, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you guys went through all that data, and that's really great findings. So I always ask my guests if there are books they recommend that every gun owner should read, either about firearms or history or politics. Any come to mind?
Yeah. You know what? And I know this probably gets thrown out there quite a bit because, I don't know, I see it talked about in a lot of different places and also different podcasts. And I think he's been on your podcast before, but it would have to be Andrew Branca's Law of Self-Defense book. I know that's not a shooting book necessarily, but I just think it's a book that if you carry a gun for self-defense, or even if you just have a gun in your home for home defense, even if it doesn't matter because the law still applies at home or away from home. But that is a book that every serious gun owner needs to read and needs to understand those principles about the law of self-defense. I could probably come up with others, but like that just jumps in my mind first and foremost. Like, got to read that book, got to understand the law. We cover stories each week in our podcast where, so we don't call these justified save stories because, well, occasionally there's sometimes we get in a little bit of a gray area, right? Where people aren't necessarily charged with crimes. They use deadly force in defense, but whether it's discretion of a prosecutor or law enforcement or whatever it may be, there just isn't a strong enough case to really pursue, or there's no desire by, it would be totally different if you're in Chicago, right? Versus, I don't know, Oklahoma someplace, some little town in Oklahoma, right? Like you make one little slip up in Chicago, you might find yourself, you got the job done. Yes, you stopped this horrible thing from happening, but you crossed some legal line and they may charge you with it. Whereas in some more gun-friendly and self-defense-friendly areas, there might be a little bit more discretion given by prosecutors and whatnot. So, but we find stories on a weekly basis where citizens, they kind of, they're really playing with fire sometimes. They make a little bit of a wrong judgment call. Like one thing that we constantly see is property theft, and a lot of times like a vehicle theft. A common one that's come up is somebody breaks into somebody's car out in front of their house, and that homeowner goes outside the house to try to stop it, and they've got their gun, and maybe by that point the thief has they've got into the car and they're making their getaway, and so the homeowner shoots at them while they're driving off, that sort of thing. Like that happens so much more often than if I hadn't started covering these stories as a podcaster and as an instructor, I've been really tainted and biased towards our own firearm owners community, that there's mistakes that are made very frequently in some of these cases. So that, I think, is just an absolute must. You carry a gun, read Law of Self-Defense.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, that was just, I saw a video the other day where, a guy was riding a motorcycle and he had his GoPro on, and the guy walks up to him and steals his motorcycle at knife point, and the rider shoots the thief as he's driving away. And I'm watching this horrified, because of course I've read Andrew Bronca's book and spoken to him, and I'm like, this guy's got to be going to jail.
Right. I saw the same video.
Yeah. And then of course the guy who stole it drops the bike, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's like, you're better off, insurance wise, getting the money for the stolen bike than for the dropped bike. But and yeah, so yeah, that was horrifying to watch. And and as someone that trains with firearms, that's something I worry about. Like, am I gonna, even though I've read all this and I know all this, am I gonna be able to keep that clear head and make that right decision? Or 5 minutes later, I'm gonna be like, oh crap, I should have done this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
One thing I often talk about is, I think a lot of it is mindset, and I think we establish our mindset by exercising, doing mental exercises. And a big thing is, I think, and I think this is accomplished somewhat when you read a book like Law of Self-Defense, because there's enough information and different examples and stories in there to kind of help drive some of the points home. But I think just trying to think of all the different possible scenarios that might occur in your home, or might occur, while you're driving your vehicle, or might occur out in public, and just, having a clear understanding of the law, and then doing mental exercises where I think many people do kind of mental rehearsals, thinking, okay, if this happened, I would draw my gun and I would, do this and do that, and shoot my gun, and like. And some people get really into it as far as like they mentally visualize, okay, all right, to draw my gun, I reach down my support hand and I grasp my shirt, and I, what I mean? Like they get into every little step of the process. I think we need to do the same thing, but from like a legal perspective. And that way that we start to build these neural pathways that are just automatically programmed to understand that my number one focus, if I use deadly force, is to stop a deadly threat, is to stop that threat. And once the threat is stopped or gone, like he leaves voluntarily, then I have to stop using force. I can't, be shooting at somebody as he's making a getaway. We had that case that's still, obviously pending in Florida, the shop owner, pawn shop owner, right? That shot the man that was stealing a hatchet. And you look at that, you watch that video, and you go, man, like, even if he gets off of that, and I don't know, I think he's really probably in some serious trouble with that one. But even if he gets off, like, what he did, I still say from a moral side of things, is not the right thing to do. Let that dude just go. The telling sign for me, James, was you see the video and the dude is already halfway out the door, and the shop owner is grabbing his shirt and trying to pull him back in while he has a gun in the other hand. Like, that tells you everything about that shop owner's mindset. And his mindset was not necessarily defending himself, but, whoa, you can't leave with my property. Come here. And the dude resists, and he pulls the trigger. Like, that's a problem, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah. And you watch things like that, and you kind of, and not that we want to judge the people that are in those situations, but I'm looking at it as the anti-gunners are going to see this video, and and then you kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, how can people find you guys? Obviously, concealedcarry.com. Any other links we should throw up there?
Yeah, so obviously you got our website. That's pretty easy to remember. You can find us on. Oh, by the way, for just referencing the active shooter study, if someone wants to just go and check that out right now, it's really easy to do. You can go to concealedcarry.com/active shooter study, and I'll take you directly to that report. You can find us on Facebook at Concealed Carry Inc. We're pretty active there. You can find us on Twitter, which is actually a little bit different. It's at USA Firearm is our Twitter handle. Instagram is Concealed Carry Inc. And then if someone wants to just reach out directly, whether it's a prospective instructor or someone that just has questions, you can send us an email at support@concealedcarry.com.
Great. Well, I thank you so much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Hey man, thanks for having me. My honor to have you, allow me to come on. I would just say to folks out there, know the law, and then dedicate your time to not only the knowledge and understanding of that law, but then put in the necessary time to really develop your skills as a shooter, both from a weapons manipulation standpoint. Like those things should just be second nature. It should happen automatically. And beyond that, then if we make the weapons manipulation and the actual shooting piece more automatic, then it really frees up our mental bandwidth to be in a lot better place from a tactical perspective. So that's a big thing with me is hone the skills to where it happens as automatic or as close to automatically as possible, and then save that bandwidth in the heat of the moment so that you can actually be thinking tactically and thinking smartly, and also be, understanding of the law, in that heat of the moment situation as well. So that's a big thing. I think if people did those things, they would be so much better off than the average concealed carrier or gun owner out there. So that'd be it, and then be safe.
Great. Riley, I thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 106 of the Out of Order Gun Rights podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/108. And please remember to check out our sponsors, scotshot.com and Gift for Gun Nuts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.